Aloha everybody, this is Kaylani from the Wild Wahine, and this is your astro forecast for this upcoming week. This is really going to be an interesting week, and this is also going to be an interesting episode because I have a lot of construction that is happening, so you might hear some clanks and some bangs and all kinds of things. And I thought I woke up early enough to record this so we wouldn't hear that, but we may hear some things coming in. So I feel like I'm having my own personal Mars in Libra moment, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But yes, this week we have a lot of different energy that's coming in. The sun is actually making an opposition to Neptune. We also have the sun trining Pluto, and then we have Mars moving into the sign of Libra, which is in its detriment. And then we're closing it out with Venus squaring Saturn. So with all that said, let's jump into the forecast and talk about some of this energy. So we're first starting with the sun and its opposition to Neptune. We're going to be feeling that from the 12th to the 20th. It's perfecting on the 14th. The sun right now is in the sign of Virgo, and it's kind of its last degrees of Virgo before it transitions into Libra. And Neptune is in Pisces, and it's retrograde right now. So what are some of the positive things that can come from this particular aspect? So when we're talking about the sun, we're talking about like ourselves. We're talking about what we stand for, our personal belief, our will. It can be our creativity, how we're seen in the world, our authority, and how we assert ourselves or take up space in the world in a way that's like very embodied with who we are. Neptune is a planet of kind of transcendence and spirituality, and also dreams and illusions and also delusions. So some of the positive things that can come from this is really being in an imaginative space and thinking about some of the things that you want to do, some of the loftier goals in your life, like what's my purpose here? What am I doing? Am I along my life path? You know, reimagining that for yourself could be something that comes up right now, trying to decide, you know, like what your personal philosophy or your personal spirituality has to do with all of that. Possibly finding someone like a guru or a teacher, somebody that you're following, somebody that you look up to, somebody that's teaching you spiritual teachings or just teaching you things about your life that you can follow, that you feel connected to, that makes you feel like more connected to the whole, because that's what Neptune does. It connects us to like this outer thing that's just more than what's happening here on Earth, even though with the sun in Virgo, that's very much earthly everyday matters. How are we going from like the earthly everyday matters into like the transcendent thing? Some other things that come with this transit are just overcoming a feeling of stagnation. If you've been feeling like you've been just like lackluster or not excited about things, maybe like getting in that dream space, getting in that imaginative space, even if you're just like, okay, things are kind of crazy right now, but 2022, I'm going to do this, or I'm looking forward to this or this project. You know, just being in that kind of playful imaginative space really helps you kind of lift your mood and get out of the funk that I know a lot of us collectively have been feeling. You also might feel very connected to the water around this time, or wanting to be by water. So that can be the ocean, that can be lakes, that could also be just warm water because it is the sun. So saunas or hot springs or anything like that, depending upon where you are in the world. Try to take some time during this transit if you can. It could be baths, a foot bath, a yoni steam, like anything that has to do with water that just makes you feel relaxed and connected. At this time, it would be really good to do. Some of the challenging things that come with this, because it is an opposition, so it is the two energies that are kind of sort of trying to figure out how to work together because they feel so polar opposite. We have like Virgo here just wanting to deal with material matters every day, and we have Pisces that's just really thinking about like globally or also like universally what's happening in the world or what's happening in your spiritual sense. Some of the challenges that can come with that is being lost in a dream world and living only in that dream space and not being able to bring back, you know, so like the seeds that you get from the dream space and plant them, and then, you know, cultivate that crop into what you want. So you kind of stay stuck with your head essentially in the sand and not being able to really activate on your imagination, because the imagination is there for you just to bring up a lot of different things and possibly even do some healing, but then you want to take that into your life, and sometimes we just stay in the imaginative space and we're not bringing it in. Also having really weak boundaries. Neptune, especially in Pisces, is not known to be really good about boundaries or knowing where I begin or where I end and all of that. So it just, you can feel like, you know, in terms of your personality, in terms of, you know, how you're navigating the world, that you just feel boundless in a way. And that can be good in some ways because you're like boundless and connected to everything. But at the same time, if you don't have a sense of self, which very much is the sun, you don't know what you stand for. You don't know how you feel about things. You're easily swayed, and you can be also very confused and just not not sure of what you're doing and why you're here and what is your purpose, and that can lead you into a sense of like existential crisis about like what's going on, nothing means anything anymore, and all of that. So we're going into the dream space to figure things out. We're applying them practically in our lives, and we're kind of sort of going back, and that's how we meet these two energies in the middle. This can also be a lot of self-deception, especially when it comes to like guru worship. There can be a lot of like spiritual narcissism, spiritual bypassing. Make sure you're watching who you listen to. With Neptune in play, especially when it's in opposition and it's retrograde, we don't know that what we're hearing is the truth. A lot of misinformation, disinformation, just a lot of information, a buttload of information we're wading through, and we just really don't know what to believe or how to believe. You're trying to trust yourself, which again is the sun, but then you also have this information, and just make sure that you're passing it through all the sieves that you need to pass through so that you're coming up on something that works for you. And if you find that it doesn't work either in theory or application, don't be afraid to switch that and change that out and move to something else, because that's the process of trying to sift through stuff, and we can see that just in everything that's going on in the world. It also could be a time too where you just want to make sure you're shoring up on your health, because it can be a time of sickness. I mean, we're already going through the Rona, so we already know what that is, but just to make sure that you're shoring up on that. If you have any questions about that or want some tips on that, I do have a video on my YouTube channel, which I did for the beach log, where we were talking about some things to kind of sort of boost that health. So make sure you check that out. And next up is the sun trining Pluto. We're going to be feeling this the 14th through the 20th. It perfects on the 16th. Pluto is in Capricorn. The sun again is in Virgo. And so, a lot of this energy has to do with power and our relationship to power, and how we're feeling empowered in our lives, and how we can use that power to bring about the things that we want to bring about, or to kind of regenerate us where we've maybe been a little stagnant or where we haven't been very active. So the positive things that come out of this particular transit, it can be a really good time for big creative type energy, where we're shifting or transforming something from one thing into another, especially when it has to do with our inner self, whether we're regenerating our energy, whether we're regenerating the way that we think or the way that we do things. We might just have this breath of fresh air. Pluto has a lot to do with Phoenix type energy, a place where we maybe crashed and burned, and now the Phoenix is being reborn and rising up again. So we see that. Our relationship to power and how we're dealing with power, how we're dealing with the power dynamics in our everyday lives with people in our lives, like our loved ones, our friends, our children, our neighbors, all of that. And then our relationship to power just really on a macro scale with, just where you live, your community, your government, your all of those things. Like, we're negotiating that and what that means, and how can we come together to kind of sort of create something that is workable, for everyone. This is also a place where you can be doing a lot of shadow work, or you can be kind of, investigating the shadow to see what works for you and what doesn't, really looking into your shadow and bringing that out to life. We talked about that a little bit in our clubhouse, which was a really great conversation last week. And so, just talking about like shining some light into the dark spaces within yourself, and bringing those things that are hidden, that are, kind of enveloped in shame, bringing them out, shining light on them, and actually finding the gift that's in that. This is all has to do with that, during this time. So it's a really good time to do some shadow work. This could be a time for men or archetypal masculine energy really coming forward, kind of being reborn in some way, having a little bit more to say about situations that are happening, just because we have the sun and we also have Pluto. So we can kind of see that energy, like it could be a male figure, or it could be a male movement of some sort, or a masculine movement, or something we would identify as masculine movement coming forward. So some of the challenges with this is, we know that whenever we're dealing with Pluto, there's always a sense of death and rebirth with that. This is, happening with the sun also in opposition to Neptune. There is a sense of possible loss or boundlessness that causes a rebirth in us, where we kind of regenerate in a place where something was dead, so relationships perhaps that have gone, on the rocks, or ways that we identify ourselves. We're no longer identifying ourselves. We're actually identifying ourselves as something different. It could be a collapse in power dynamics, a collapse in structures that happen, a collapse that happens though, but in the end, everything is going to be okay. It will be better in the end, even though you're going through a difficult time. So, whenever we're holding on to structures, it becomes difficult to kind of sort of let them go, because we don't know how it's going to end up, and we have a lot of fear, which is why we hold on. There also is a lot of aggression that can come with this, just because that is the nature of things that are Plutonian, things that are kind of subterranean, things that are underground, things that have to do with like literally like earthquakes and volcanic type of activity, whether that be just in the way that you're dealing with things, or whether that actually be in a literal sense, those are some things that can come up with this. So next up we have Mars and Libra. Mars is moving into the sign of Libra September 14th through October 30th. Mars is a fiery, it's a hot, it's a dry planet. It is moving into one of Venus's signs, which is Libra, which likes to balance things, likes to harmonize things, likes to bring things together, doesn't like to exude more energy than necessary. It's all about economy of movement and beauty and art and all of that. So what happens when warrior, masculine, disharmonious, cutting, separating energy comes into the loving, warm, and kind of wet place of, you know, comfort and healing and joy and fun and love? Well, a lot of different things. It can be a place where we are exerting ourselves a little bit differently. Mars wants to always do Mars things, no matter where it is, no matter what sign it's in. Mars is still going to do the things that are competitive. Mars is still going to want to have like high sexual energy, definitely be the warrior, but it's going to do it in a little bit of a more diplomatic way, or it will deal with things with more diplomacy. It's interesting, one of the people who has this signature is Mahatma Gandhi, so it really does have to do with some of that, like I'm going to rise up and I'm going to collapse and change systems, but I'm going to do it in a non-violent way. So it really has to do with like the peaceful warrior. It has a lot of vibes of the peaceful warrior energy, like I'm going to fight, but I'm going to do it in a way that brings people together, in a way that, you know, is not as aggressive. You know, Mars wants to separate and Venus wants to bring together. So it's the way of the peaceful warrior. It's provocative and controversial relationships. Big time. Having really good, great conflict negotiation, getting into conflicts with people that you're in relationship with, you know, because Mars is here in this relational sign of Libra. It could be conflicts that have to do with the legal system as well, and how you're using the legal system in order to justify a wrong that was done to you. Some of the challenges that come with this particular transit is passive aggressiveness, because Mars is not able to be aggressive like it usually likes to be, which is like all up in your face and just like rocking the space. So there's a lot of backhandedness with that. Not so much like could be backhanded compliments or passive aggressive compliments. It also could be getting someone else to fight your battle for you, so you still look nice and like you're perfect and you don't have to worry about doing anything, but it's actually you got like the muscle who's actually implementing all of the terrible things while you look perfect and picturesque. It struggles with things that are Venusian. It struggles with things that has to do with like bringing people together and love and harmony. It wants to kind of separate and create this disharmony, but it also wants to do that in like a beautiful way. So we'll often see things that look like very disharmonious, but they're still also kind of beautiful, and we'll see that when we talk about the people. It's frustration that can be hidden, so you can have a lot of hidden frustration in this, because again, Libra wants everything to look perfect and to be picture perfect, even if it's not. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening underneath with that, so it can build a lot of frustration and like, you know, you wanting to activate and just say things and do things, but you're like, oh, I can't do that because, you know, like that's not the nice thing to do and that's not the right thing to do, so let me do that. So that can be a lot of inflammation and anger, and then when it gets released like in the back end. Conflicts that are resolved in a backward way, and that are not directly aggressive. So it reminds me a lot of like how countries use proxy wars, right? Like the two countries want to fight against each other, but they're huge countries and they know if they do, then it would cause a much bigger casualty. So they'll use like other smaller countries and kind of fight these, like, well, I'm going to put some soldiers here. Well, I'm going to put some soldiers here, and have their countries do proxy war, where the countries themselves are like, oh, I'm fine, we're not in any wars. Meanwhile, you're doing these proxy wars. To me, that's very Mars and Libra. A couple people that have Mars and Libra is Gandhi. Again, he was a peaceful warrior and a diplomat. Tanya Harding, that's a really good like visual example of that, with her like athleticism and in her skating, you know, but then also like the beauty and the athleticism. But her athleticism was considered always, you know, at that time to be like more quote unquote masculine, because she was doing like, she had just a lot of power and she was doing jumps and moves that were more associated with men. And so that like that difficulty with Nancy Kerrigan, who was considered like the classic, you know, ice skater, because she had more Venusian quality to her. So it's kind of like Mars in Venus's sign of Libra. So, you know, visibly it reminds me of that. Hitchcock also, he makes like the dark things look beautiful, you know, like if you think of Psycho and you think of like the scene in the bathroom, I mean, obviously like it's like a dark scene, but there's also something like this very like beautiful in terms of the way it's shot with the black and white, and The Birds, which is one of my favorite movies. It's like, you know, these are like horror movies, but they're like beautiful kind of gothic horror movies. We find that a lot with Mars Libra. And last but certainly not least, we have Venus squaring Saturn. So Venus, this is going to be happening September 14th through the 20th. It's perfecting on the 16th. Venus is in detriment in Scorpio. So really during this time, we have two planets, Mars in detriment, and we also have Venus, as we talked about last week, being in detriment in Scorpio too. Saturn is at home in Aquarius, and this is a conversation that's going to be feeling a little bit different than the conversation that we had, I believe it was like a week or two ago when Venus was trining Saturn. So some of the positive things that can come with this particular transit is, being responsible, being fiscally responsible, being responsible to your community, being responsible to your relationships. Of course, when Venus is involved, that tends to do with our relationships, our love relationships, and all of that. So being a good partner, you could be working on a long-term relationship. We're talking about Venusian things that are having a difficult time now with Saturn, and Saturn has this kind of cold and rigid type of structure, and Venus wants to just like have flowers in her hair and walk through the forest and pet the animals and just have birds, come and sit on her and so forth. And so sometimes this ends up being like a little bit of a difficult time. It could have to do with like spending time with older people, learning wisdom from older people, learning wisdom about your relationship with older people, or people who have been in relationships for a long time, getting advice from them. It could be challenging in your relationship to work with your coworkers, working with other people, the challenges that come with working with other people at your job. It could be around healing work or healing your relationships. It could be doing healing work around breakups or rejection, or dealing with rejection from someone, especially if you recently had a breakup or you're going through a difficult time in your relationship. I told you that there was going to be some sounds. Almost made it through the video without there being any sounds. Some of the challenges that can come with this, and we're almost done, is relationships that are challenged. So this can be a difficult bump for our relationship. Relationships that are challenged, that could be challenged by older people, especially because it's Saturn. Relationships that get kind of boring, or they're like a little bit ho-hum, and they're relationships where one person is feeling rejected, like they're not being cared for, like they're not being valued in the relationship. It could be about like just the business of your relationship. If you're in a relationship with somebody and you guys are business owners, and so you've been relating to each other in a business way the whole time, just working on the business part of your business, and you kind of like lost the intimacy in your relationship. It could be a time to really kind of focus on how you want to bring that back, because suddenly you're like work partners and you're losing the intimate time. You're like, we spend time together all the time, but we're working on the business. How can we reconnect? Really good thing to do. Make sure, especially for couples that work together, just a little tip, definitely make sure you spend couple time outside. Do not count the time that you're working on your business as couple time together, because it's not. It's time that you're working as business partners in your business. So make sure that you put that aside, and then you actually spend like couple fun, intimate time together, because it's important. Two different times. It could be about the coldness or the separation in the relationship, relationships that are challenged, getting over relationships that have failed. Like I said before, the difficulty that it takes holding on to something that is really something that you should be letting go, because it's really just not serving you and it's causing you pain, and you're waiting. A lot of times when things with Saturn are just delayed, Saturn, is delayed. It's like, I've been waiting for so long for him to propose. I've been waiting for so long for her to get everything together so that we can be together. I've been waiting, just waiting for things that just might not necessarily happen. But it also could be, since Venus is in Scorpio, with that being said, a place where you're really transforming and you're healing a broken relationship. And that can be any relationship. It can be love relationships. It can be friendships. It can be just like a separation that happened, but you still have to work together because you have kids together, because you have the business together, because of whatever. And it's just like, how can we kind of transform and heal from this? How can I heal my heart after going through a difficult time? It could also look like fear of long-term commitment. So if you're the kind of person sounds. So it could be fear of long-term commitments if you're the type of person that really is afraid to commit for whatever reason, because of hurt, because of whatever is going on in your life, past relationships, because you couldn't depend on a family member that wasn't there as a child, which made you disconnect from people. Healing that, like, now is the time to heal that so that you can connect and find love and be happy. Not that like finding love makes you happy. Like, there's many things that make you happy, but like, if that's what you want, if you feel like, okay, this is an integral part of my happiness, healing that up with Venus and Scorpio, because that's a good thing that she does there. I know she's in detriment there, and everyone's like, oh, Venus and Scorpio, but it's a very good time to heal. the heart. So thank you so much for joining me for this astro forecast. I know that there was like little sounds that are coming in and out, but that's just how it is because, you know, Mars and Libra, disharmonious in the home space. That's supposed to be peaceful space. So that happens sometimes. But thank you so much for joining. Again, my name is Kaylani. This is the Wild Wahine. You can follow me. Make sure you like and follow and subscribe and comment below if you have any questions. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter and also on Clubhouse. And I will see you for the beach live this Friday. Aloha. Bye.